In this video, I want to talk about the psychology of a photograph. Now, if you're a portrait, wedding, or client-serving photographer, this might just be one of the most important lessons of your career.
My name is Pi, and I'm one of the founders of Lynn and Jersa Photography and SLRLounge.com. We're teaming up with Adorama to bring you a new series of photography tutorials called Master Your Craft right here on Adorama TV. So let's dive in.
Hello, my friends. My name is Pi. Welcome to Adorama TV. Okay, so this video is all about photography and specifically the psychology of photography. I'm going to get into the why it matters to you, how it's going to help you create happier clients, avoid unhappy clients, and kind of the typical mistakes that we make as photographers. You'll even better understand your peers in this overall photography industry. But before we get into this, I think a backstory might be a little bit helpful, so I'll keep it short. And mind you, this is a podcast style video, so feel free to watch the video if you like, but you can also just listen along, hence the podcast style mic, so you get the voice. So many of you might already know this, especially if you followed my premium education inside of SLR Lounge. I fancy myself a photographer, a business person, yes, a educator and frameworks kind of guy, but also an amateur psychologist. Yeah, not like licensed or studied formally. What you don't know is that over the past 20 years, my passion, well, in all my free time, has been to study psychology. I find the subject of human psychology, from behavior to connection to relationships, fascinating. I even did a research project on relationships that led to a book, which then turned into a partnership with a doctor of psychology and a professor at Whittier College with over 20 years of clinical experience, Dr. Glenn Hong, and we formed 12-week relationships. Now, none of that has anything to do with Adorama TV or photography. It's just a little bit of an idea of why I like this subject. But when it comes to photography itself, why do I believe psychology plays such a huge component? Well, in my opinion, photography is psychology. And that's why I build so much psychology into our premium education. And I'm going to explain why, starting with, I want to define the product itself. What is a photograph? Well, oftentimes as photographers, when we look at a photograph, we kind of tend to think about the technical. We think about the medium. We think about how it should be used. You know, a photograph isn't a photograph until it's printed, or until it's in a book, an album, wall art, whatever it might be. But we don't often realize what the actual product is. It is a psychological product. This is an emotional anchor, meaning when you look at a photograph, it takes the viewer to some place. Now, if you're in the photograph, it's taking you back to maybe a particular experience, the memory, something positive, something that you want to kind of relive over and over in that photograph. If you captured the photograph, maybe the feeling is more so the journey, the moments leading up to capturing the photograph. But those are the things that we appreciate, and a photograph is simply an emotional anchor. Okay, so this sounds sort of fluffy. I mean, what does that have to do with being a better photographer, or making our clients happy, or avoiding mistakes, or understanding each other? Everything. So I'm going to explain this from two perspectives, okay? So I want to do this. On the left side, probably your right side, on the left side, we have one perspective. This is the photographer's perspective, okay? Let's think of the hobbyist, the person that's not a professional, but they're passionate and they're good at photography. On the right side, let's think of the client or the person in the photograph. We're going to do a couple things. First, let's talk about the product from that photographer's perspective, right? When we first get into photography, usually we kind of focus in on the technical, and a lot of us really never get past this place, especially if, you know, you're a hobbyist, if this is your passion, then you might really appreciate the sharpness of a lens. You know, how often do we get lost talking about these technical details, sensor size, quality, shooting raw or not, and the way that we light and the perfect light quality, the right pose and composition. These are the things that we appreciate, which means that as photographers, when we look at a photograph, those are the things that we see, and that is our product. That is our experience. This is important because it's the reason why, as a photographer, you might look at an image and it might hold a lot of value to you, but not necessarily another photographer. Because especially if you're the person that captured that image, we're talking about your journey leading up to that photograph. So this might have been the first time you got the perfect light. It might have been the first time you nailed the composition. But to another photographer, it might not have that sense of meaning. And to somebody else, it's simply, is this a piece of eye candy or not, at least from that photography perspective? And by the way, there is no right or wrong to this, especially if photography is your passion, right? It's not your profession. By all means, get lost in the technical, get lost in those details. That is the product to you. That is the experience. But let's go to the other side of this. So from the client's perspective, so now we're on the other side of this, right? The person in the photograph. So let's assume that we are capturing images for somebody else. The person inside of the photograph sees none of those things. In fact, when they look back at the image, they're simply going to use that photograph as that anchor to go back to that time and place. They're going to remember the moments leading up to that image. They're going to remember the experience that they had maybe with their partner, if there was one. They're going to remember how they felt in the photograph, whether they were confident or not. And they're going to remember their interactions with you. What they're not going to be thinking about are technical details. How it was shot, what lens you used, whether it was raw, how you lit it. None of those things, because those things are not important for that person. That is not their product. So to them, the anchor takes them back to the experience within the photograph. This is where I want to do an exercise, because maybe all of that is still sounding a little bit not so tangible. And I want to bring this home. So we're going to do a visualization exercise. What I'd like you to do is close your eyes. Actually, I said that this was a podcast style episode. So if you're listening in the car, do not close your eyes, okay? Find a safe place. Then close your eyes. And I want you to think from a personal standpoint. You're no longer a photographer. Doesn't matter whether you're a hobbyist or professional, you're no longer a photographer. I want you to simply think of a photograph that you personally appreciate. Could be a photograph with you in it, might be your children, might be anything, but it's of a personal nature. It's either you or your loved ones in that image. And I want you to think of maybe one that you might say is your favorite personal photograph. Okay, lock it in. If you can actually find the image, great. Pull it up and look at it. If not, just again, keep the eyes closed and think about that image. I'm going to show you mine. This is personally my favorite photograph, and it's this. This is a photograph of my father and I. See, my dad, he's an immigrant. He brought me over from Iran to give me a better life, and he left everything to do that. He's a single father. He raised me by himself while earning a degree in civil engineering, I think a master's degree as well, and while working as an engineer in Utah. And during this entire time, my dad was incredibly busy. He was trying to provide for his son, and he didn't have any partner to help him with that entire endeavor. But I remember still he would make time to take me to do things. And he knew that I loved planes. Like every kid, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. So every time the air show came through, he would take me. And it was a regular thing. I went to a lot of air shows when I was younger, and I loved every minute of it. This photograph, when I look at that, it reminds me of this. Not just this particular moment, because I don't really remember the moment itself, but what I remember is all the sacrifices that my father had made and the relationship that we had built with each other in going to these air shows, and just my dad spending time with me, even though he really didn't have time. Now, for my dad, if he looked at this photograph, maybe he would think of all the stress and pressure that he felt as a father during this time, but not me. When I look at it, this is what I feel and this is what I see, and that's what I want you guys to think for yourself. The image that you chose, what is it about that photograph that you love? What anchor point does it take you back to? After you have thought about that, maybe you'll pause this and think through it. If you want, write it down. Record a video of yourself talking and expressing yourself about that photograph. But when you're done, I want you to continue. Okay, so you should be done. Now, what I can promise is that you probably didn't think about anything technical. I mean, again, when I look at this photograph, it's nothing technically great. The colors have been long faded. Let's see. The airplane in the background composition is really not helping things. We have a truck back there. It's not overly sharp. In fact, I think this might be back focused. I mean, nothing about this image is technically worthwhile from a photographic standpoint, from a technical standpoint, right? I'm not winning any awards for this. And yet it's my favorite photograph. What does all this mean? Because I'll guarantee you went through the same process and you thought nothing technical. Well, what it means is that this exercise, understanding that photography as a product is a psychological product, it's an emotional anchor. This is going to be your greatest strength. And for those that don't understand this, their greatest weakness. Let's go back to the photographer's perspective, right? The hobbyist, the amateur, the passionate person that might be great at photography, but this isn't their business. Have you noticed that people in the photography community can be overly critical and even trolls when it comes to just critiquing other people's work? And this whole phenomenon gets exaggerated whenever a celebrity comes out and publishes any of their personal images, which they hired a professional photographer, or in the, kind of viewer's mind, a professional photographer to capture. A great example of this might be Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, right? They released these engagement photographs. And how many photographers went to critique those images? These aren't professional. They aren't well lit. They're terrible. Backgrounds are blown out. The posing, all of this stuff. Why are they doing this? Well, our peers are doing this because for them, the product, a photograph, is an emotional anchor that ties them back to their technical experience. They look at a photograph and they think of their experience and their journey in photography from the standpoint of achieving sharpness and technical perfection and the right colors and a perfect composition, the best lighting and all of these things. So when they look at a photograph, they can't see value beyond that perspective because to them, that is the product. That is their experience. Now that's their failing point too, because now if we flip to the other side of this, most photographers don't end up learning this lesson till well into their professional career. So now let's think on the client perspective, and more importantly, let's go to the professional photographer in thinking about their client, right? Well, unfortunately, most of us take this route where we often get stuck in the technical and we never come out of it. Some of you, especially the ladies, you tend to be more emotionally in tune. Some of the guys too, you're more emotionally in tune, and maybe you get past this. You start to recognize what a photograph actually is and the experience that's important behind it. But for the rest of us, we tend to get lost in those technical details. And I'm saying all this not from the standpoint of like, this is things that I know and I'm perfect. I'm saying this from the standpoint of like, I've made all these mistakes. And not only have I had to learn and create something that I could understand, and this became our education and whatnot, but I see everybody else making the same mistakes, from our own studio photographers, like the photographers that come in and they apply to be associate photographers and they train up. In that process of training, well, they inevitably have shoots that don't go well and the clients are unhappy as they learn how to be one of our associate photographers. So hundreds of times I've seen them make these mistakes. And, this is not in the cases of, at least for the most part, these are test shoots and these are like early shoots before they become associates. But even then, they can still do a paid gig and have unhappy clients. Then I see peers and I see our students. I've been fortunate enough to teach millions of photographers around the world online, and thousands of them have come to me and said, here's a gallery. Take a look at this and tell me, are the images good? Because the clients hate them. They want a refund. These are experiences that if you haven't had as a professional, you will have, unless you understand the product that you're actually selling. Because here's what happens in almost every single one of these cases. I go and I look at that gallery and what I see are beautiful photographs. I see photographs that are technically flawless. They're great poses, even good expressions. And yet the clients are still unhappy and the photographers are baffled. And each time I go back to the experience, tell me, what was the experience like for the client? See, maybe you did something that you really didn't know. There's a whole myriad of things that could be done, right? Maybe a photographer goes in and starts shooting and you take a couple shots and then you go and you say to the guy, hey, I want you to take a breath in because your belly's showing a little bit and there's some wrinkles in the shirt, right? Now, maybe you think that you're just being clear and direct with them. And, that's a good thing, but in a certain way, because for him, he might have internalized that, felt self-conscious, and then whenever he looks back at those photographs, That's all he sees. It doesn't even matter if it was fixed or not. It doesn't matter if the rest of those photographs, he looks great and his chest is out and there is no belly. He's going to perceive it because that's what he felt at the time of capture. Okay, well, what about things we might say or do, for the other person? What about this overall experience? Do they like you? Do they enjoy working with you? Are you getting to know them? Do you understand what they actually value? See, in many of these instances, the clients can pick up on the photographer not actually understanding them as people. And this is one of our core needs. We need the people that we engage with, the person across from us, especially the person that we're going to hire. We need them to understand our values. In fact, we're paying them to adopt our values temporarily and to photograph us with their creative vision, but based on our internal values. This is why so much of our premium education, because that's designed for professionals, is focused around psychology and the experience, because we have to uncover those values early on in the process and then deliver based upon those values. We need to get to the shoot. We need to engage and interact, and we need to help them, make them feel confident, have them enjoy that. This should be an experience for our clients where they come in and they remember not only the process of capture, but everything leading up to it was something enjoyable, like a positive activity on a vacation or anything else that you might do. That's the experience that we're trying to create with photography, and that is the product behind the photograph. So if they're feeling particularly confident because you've helped them and you've brought them to this, oh my goodness, she's capturing exactly what we want, all of this, then they're going to think back on those images and think, how incredible was our photographer to understand this? But if that piece is missing, it doesn't matter how good the photographs are. It doesn't matter how you lit them, how you edited them, how perfect they are, the resolution, the sharpness. None of that stuff matters. If the experience wasn't good, the only thing they're going to think about when they see those photographs is that experience. So, photography is a psychological product. It's an emotional anchor that brings us back to something. Great. So how do we avoid unhappy clients? And by the way, when you use this understanding to then understand your peers, it makes a lot more sense, right? Because when I see Meghan and Harry's images or other celebrities' photographs, I don't judge them based on technical components. I look at them and go, those are beautiful. There was a story that they were trying to tell. There was a message they were trying to convey. There was an authenticity that they wanted captured. And it's in those photographs, and nothing else matters. If they're happy, nothing else matters. This is the difference in the way that two different photographers within our industry are going to communicate with each other. And you can see on the one side, the photographer who values technical versus on the other side, the photographer who values the experience. They're going to not really communicate well or understand each other. Okay, so knowing this, well, it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? You know the downside of not creating a great experience is unhappy clients, regardless of how good those images are. Well, there's an incredible upside to this. In fact, this was going to become your superpower as a professional photographer. Knowing that the photograph is experiential, and that really what matters is how a person feels when this is captured and everything leading up to that moment and the experience after. And well, I don't have to stress really that much anymore as a technical photographer, right? I'm not saying not to be technical. I'm not saying not to create great images. I'm not saying not to do any of those things. I'm saying that how often do we go on shoots and we rack our brains, especially earlier in our careers, thinking, how am I going to do things different? How am I going to level up? How am I going to, blow these guys away? How am I going to create the next award-winning image? And frankly, it's stressful. It makes going on to shoots stressful. Makes being on shoots stressful because you're not really managing the client experience. You're managing the technical aspects of the craft and the gear and everything that you need to get to these photographic technical goals. But when you reverse that, when you approach this from the beginning based on the client's values, well, we walk through an exercise with our clients where we literally paint a mental picture of the most important images that we're going to capture. We call the exercise the W.A.V.E. And it's within that premium education. And I think I've talked about it online as well. Once I understand what my clients value, once I know the images they want captured, I have a clear picture of every image because I know how they perceive the world. I know how they see their own relationship. And it paints a picture for me of every single image that I need to capture before I even take out my camera. So When it does get to the time of the shoot, I'm not worried or thinking about the technical because I've already thought through each of the images that I need to create for them. They're paying me, and in this relationship, they're paying me to adopt their value set, right? So anything that I get that goes beyond that, that maybe is technically outstanding or, the perfect composition or award winning, that is icing on the cake. But the cake itself is that experience, and knowing what they value, I get to focus on the experience. Half the time, knowing what type of imagery they want to create, I don't even have to take out a lot of gear. They identify all these authentic, natural light, beautiful images that are just in the moment. I'm going to take one lens in my camera, and that's it. I mean, not every client is going to have the same set of values, obviously, right? Some are going to want authenticity and just in the moment and natural type images. And some are going to want the dramatic. They're going to want things pulled back. They're going to want something to hang up on the wall, something to get published. The value sets can vary across this entire range, but it's your job as the photographer to uncover that early in the process. Now, when you do, this beautiful thing happens. Your job gets easier. Your job is really done for you. I mean, at that point, you're just using your creative eye to capture what they appreciate, and you already know what you're doing. So you actually get to go out and enjoy the experience along with them. You get to focus on that experience. And then photography becomes something different. It's no longer about pleasing difficult clients or any of those things. It's about putting yourself into their shoes and loving them for who they are, and then using your creative vision to go and document and show them their incredible world through your eyes. So that said, what does photography and psychology have to do with each other? Everything. If y'all enjoyed this video, and if you love both the technical and everything soft skills and directing and communication, the psychology of what we do as professional photographers, well, check out SLR Lounge Premium Education. That is literally what it is, an A to Z guide covering everything. If you all like the topic of human psychology and relationships, I'd invite you to join me and Dr. Glenn on our podcast at 12-Week Relationships. And in the meantime, I want to see you guys comment on this video. Let me know what you think. If you found it insightful, feel free to share it. Give it a like and subscribe to Adorama TV, because I'm going to be back here bringing you guys more videos, and I'm going to look at those comments and see what other questions might you guys have. I don't always get a chance to respond to every single comment, but I do read them. So please leave your thoughts, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.